And welcome everyone to another installment of the Show Will Go On Business Survival Series webinar. This is episode number 6, and I am still your host, Tom Stimson, president of Stimson Group. You can find me at all these places, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the usual suspects. Please visit trstimson.com. We've got blog posts there. That's where the webinar replay is listed. Anytime I have an event or somebody to register for, you will find it there. Thanks for visiting. We have videos on YouTube as well. Probably need to add a few more of those here of lately. A couple of announcements as we get started. Avixa, thank you for supporting this event and for all the things that you're doing for the live events community. Avixa is offering a free membership, a free individual membership, which right now makes you eligible for free online training well into June, so take advantage of all of that. They're also hosting an event called the Business Survival Exchange, which takes place on Friday after this webinar, and this Friday's topic will be this webinar. So there's a place for you to come together with your cohort, your attendees from this, and discuss this in a roundtable fashion on Zoom. They put you out into breakouts. It's a great way for you to understand how Zoom can work for you and how your clients are using it. So it's a good experience for that. But the conversations have been great. I get feedback reports from you guys in your calls and letters to me, and from my team. Wallace Johnson is on those calls as well. So it sounds like it's working fantastically. I'm in touch with the Avixa people about the program and making sure that they have what they need to make that run better. So do take advantage of that as an extension of what we do here today. Of course, the webinar is going to be recorded. Take a shot of that with your phone. You'll be able to get to it right away. I am still helping people. I'm still doing the free 15-minute calls. If you haven't taken yours yet, please do. Sometimes it helps just to tell somebody else what you've done and where you're at and be comfortable with the decisions that you've made. However, there's still a lot of help that can be taken out of one of these calls. I helped somebody yesterday, had a major contract that was in dispute through this crisis, and I think I helped them get to a place where, one, they'll be able to preserve the relationship and extract maximum value out of it. So use the call in whatever way that is valuable for you. I'm happy to do it, and please continue to make those appointments. Last week, I announced the Live Event Business Reboot Coaching. This is a group coaching program. To be clear, this is a paid program. This is not another one of my free things. We've almost formed the first group. I've had confirmations even this morning leading into this webinar. So we'll be announcing the first group, or the people who are going to be admitted to the first group, probably at the beginning of next week. And then we'll start building the next group and the group after that. I've had requests. While the program is designed for owners, I've had requests from owners that there be a group for their second in command or their general managers. Hey, if we can get a few folks that want to put their name on that list and commit to that, absolutely, more than happy to do it. We want them to be able to gather and process issues from the employee standpoint. I work with these people all the time in my consulting practice. I think this is a great idea. So let's use the platform and let's maximize it for you the way that you want to use it. So if you have any other ideas about how we can make that valuable for you, don't hesitate to bring that to my attention. I've already got a bunch of questions going on the Q&A thing, so thank you for bringing that. I know some of you sent me a few in advance by email. If you do send me a question by email, I almost always answer it, so don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have some questions or something you want me to talk about in the webinar. A couple of updates before I go into the recap. In the US, my apologies to our international listeners, but in the US, we've seen PPP disbursements and EIDL disbursements take place this past week. Even people who thought that the money had run out have gotten their disbursement, myself included, because the money was already in the disbursement pipeline. So, the process does work. It's not highly communicative, but the more in touch you are with your bank, the more information they can give you about when was your application submitted, and when do you hear back from the SBA, and then after that you get your papers to sign, which are the loan papers, and then shortly after that, no more than 5 days per statute, you will get the disbursement. I also, many of us have received our EIDL money, which is a grant from the SBA in addition to that. So things are starting to move a little bit. Makes it a little bit easier to breathe, knowing that you've got a little bit of cash flow to work with, buys you a little bit of time. Now, I do want to talk about this issue of opening up the economy. I'm in a state where the governor wants to try and open things up. Many of us feel this is extremely premature, but whether you feel it is or not, it's not they think they're opening up the economy. What they're doing is they make it possible for some small businesses to open up. I don't want to be overly cynical about this. One of the advantages for a state opening up is that means that all the people who are on unemployment who could now go back to work again get knocked off unemployment. There's some advantage to the state for that. There's some disadvantages to the small businesses in these opening, in which case, one, all of a sudden that unemployment, if they stay on unemployment, you're responsible for instead of the crisis being responsible for that. So take this information with a grain of salt. It doesn't put us back to work. We are the first ones squashed, and we will be the last ones that are made whole again through this whole pandemic crisis. The reality is, and there was a note on here, somebody asked me about reconsidering my updated recovery timeline. I have said since the beginning that most of us should not expect any significant revenue through February or through August of this year. I still stand by that. That's still going to be true. But the reality is the types of events that we want to do that are the major sources of our income or have traditionally been, we won't see until sometime well into 2021. We're starting to realize that a lot of the things that we want to be able to do and gathering again won't happen until there's a vaccine. We've known this, but the reality of how long that's actually going to take is becoming more and more apparent. Now, that's not a reason to be even more despondent than you already are, as I will talk about today, because there's lots of things that we can do. We need a healthier outlook on what revenue is and what we can do to keep our businesses alive until we can finally get back to the point where we're doing the kind of work that we really, really love. Sometimes you got to do the work that's not your favorite work in order to get through the crisis, and that's where we are. So we'll talk more about that today. Airplane mode. I'm still having conversations with folks who have made that, maybe that first step or that second step of cuts in their business. They haven't really made it to airplane mode. If you have 25 employees and you're down to 7 and you're doing 75% salary and you're patting yourself on the back, but you have no revenue in your forecast for the rest of the year, I think you might want to reconsider this. Okay? You probably need to be down to even fewer employees and even less overhead. So to make a good assessment of where you are in airplane mode, look at the cash flow projection that you created, I think in the second webinar. Look at that and see how far out it goes. And every little thing that you do changes that. A little bit of revenue here, somebody pays you that you thought was not going to pay you, that money shows up, you get your EIDL injection. All of these things move your timeline, hopefully forward, but maybe backwards a little bit. Look at your staffing level. If you're worried about having the people you need to reopen your business, to go back to business as usual, how would you think differently if business as usual didn't happen until the end of 2021? So we're going to do business per pandemic in the meantime, and we can run profitable businesses. We can put groceries on our table. We can keep our assets available to us. There's a lot of things we can be doing, but you need to get to a real airplane mode where there's minimal output from your business, the least amount of overhead you can possibly carry. And this all comes back to thinking like a startup. And I know a lot of you aren't the person who started up your company. You may have bought the company from someone else. You may have inherited it. You may have acquired it as an employee, taking it over from an owner. There's a number of ways where you could own a company now, but not have had the startup experience, the bootstrap experience of starting a business. Or maybe you were independently wealthy and you blew it all on this industry. So there's a lot of you who don't know what being a startup is. And let me tell you, I've done it 3 times. It's hard. Okay, you got to scrap for stuff. My original business plan as a consultant, the first year I survived by writing $350 articles for magazines. But here's the thing is, I had 3 magazines published to me every month. That was $1,000 a month to keep me going. That was a lot of groceries. Now, I needed more stuff, but you have to be diversified in doing this, and you've got to be pretty open to doing stuff that you probably won't do later on in your business life. So enough of that. Let's move on to the recap. Last week was hard for many of you, and I get that. Changing our understanding of pricing and the pricing paradigm and relating price to cost, this is graduate level work. I went to grad school to learn how to talk about this stuff. And even then, I still have 40 years of experience that helps me deal with it better. Some of you haven't had that. So the big takeaway from last week is that you need to focus on your costs and minimizing your costs before you convert something into a price. You'll be much more effective at pricing or putting a value onto something if you have a better understanding of what your costs are. And this is like that whole cash flow spreadsheet. You are so much better at controlling your costs when you have them laid out in front of you and you see the effect of changing a number and what it does to your future. Okay? Understanding your costs and your cost basis and your overhead costs before you price something will help you as well. Now, of course, I said all this last week, the traditional technology rental pricing paradigm is pretty arbitrary. And that means it's highly negotiable. And your customers know that. So we want to work on reducing that. So I added a little bit of content to last week to help you better understand how to look at revenue through the cost lens. Okay? So let's just think about a simple transaction, which right now, for many of you, this would make your week or make your month. So you have a small job, you price it together, it's $1,000 worth of gear, it's $1,000 worth of labor and delivery, and another $250 of delivery charges. So $2,250 job. Obviously, it's an LED job because there's very little equipment revenue and lots of labor. Now, what are the actual direct costs on these things? Well, right now, you have no direct costs on that gear. You own the gear, it's sitting on the shelf, it's not doing things. You have indirect costs and you have overhead costs like loans and leases and warehouse space, but none of that factors into how you price the job. The purpose of pricing a job is to generate gross profit, and the gross profit of the job is what pays for that overhead. So you have a bucket of overhead you need to whittle down a few dollars at a time, and every job is going to contribute gross profit to help cover the cost of that overhead. Otherwise, it carries over to the next month. It reduces your available cash. It shortens how long your business will survive. Now, in this simple model here, we figure our labor costs, and this is fairly traditional pricing. 75% of our labor pricing is our labor costs. I've got to pay a crew to come in and prep the job. They've got to de-prep it later, load the truck, get it out there, deliver it, and set up. So I've got a couple of guys, 8 hours, 2 days, blah, blah, blah. And this is assuming that you're paying the crew for work done and you don't have people on salary, or you're just paying them to come to the shop, and sometimes we bill for them. So this is assuming that they are on-call personnel that you only pay when they're executing the actual work. And then your delivery costs, well, you're already leasing the truck, so that's overhead. Yeah, you have to put some fuel in it. Maybe you have to pay a few tolls. You got a little bit of cost there. So this $2,200 and $2,250 job, $2,000 job, yields about $1,500 in gross profit, which is awesome because that's $1,500 in gross profit reduction in your overhead costs. So it pays for $1,500 of overhead. This is how the model works. Now, that's looking at it through a cost lens. Let's look at it through a value lens, because value is what we actually sell. We don't sell cost, we don't sell markup, okay? We sell value. Stand by. So I keep a computer by my side that's logged in to see what you guys see. Tells me that I'm doing my job, right? And if it dies, maybe your signal died too. So it's asking me to log back in, and it's having a little bit of trouble, so we'll let that go. All right, I'll just keep going here. So here's the same job. We have the same direct costs, okay, $770. But what if I sold it to the customer differently? Rather than saying it's the sum of the parts, I say, look, here's all the things that I will do for you. Here's the package. We're going to deliver this. We're going to set it up. We're going to do all the safety inspections. We're going to clean up after ourselves. The team's going to be supervised. We'll take care of the delivery, the return, the prep, the setup. And you explain the entire scope of all the things that you do in that, and then you name a price. Okay? So this package price includes whatever the buyer perceives as valuable. Anything they don't have to do themselves is valuable. Anything that reduces their risk or increases their comfort level is valuable to them. Anything that increases their confidence in you is valuable to them. So in terms of value, a salesperson that can sell this job for $3,000 is worth more to you than a salesman who can sell it at $2,250. Likewise, the customer who is happy to buy at $3,000 is worth more to you than a customer who will pay less. And that's what we want to do. We want to fill our pipeline with customers who value us higher than other customers do. You want to put salespeople in there that extract value and convert high value customers for you at a high profit. Okay? So this leads to an entire discussion about marketing as the tool for building your pipeline to sales. Because if you start with a bad customer, you're going to end up with a bad customer. We want to start with good customers. And how do we get good customers? And that's what marketing is all about. Marketing is a much less expensive way to get good customers than salespeople are. Salespeople are great for taking a good prospect and turning them into a paying customer. They are not a good vehicle for taking somebody who knows nothing about you and we know nothing about them and going through the process of finding out, do they need what we do? Are they a good fit, or anything else that goes along in that conversation? Now, some of the feedback that I got from last week, and certainly some of your comments in the chat and the questions, was my clients won't pay for that. I talked about raising your labor rates and charging less for equipment. My clients won't pay for that. Well, I'm not suggesting that you show your clients how you got to your valuation. I'm saying you need to value your labor more. You need to put less value into rental pricing. Look at what's important to the customer. What are they willing to pay for? What makes you worth more than the company B, their alternative or a substitution company? And that's where you generate value. So your customers' price sensitivities, and if all of your customers right now would reject a higher labor price completely out of hand, you trained them to do that. You can untrain them. Now, what have you done lately to increase their perception of your value? And if the answer is, well, nothing, because your marketing is, well, we wait for the phone to ring, okay, then you have trained your customer that your value is always going to be at a minimum. We turn our customers into price shoppers by price selling. Right now, our market is in disruption. I mean, actually, it's an atomic wasteland, okay? When your market is disrupted, okay, that is the time to make changes, because changes are expected. Nobody expects business as usual out of a completely decimated, disrupted marketplace. So now's when you make changes. Now, you can lead or you can follow, but my point is, don't become irrelevant. Don't be the company who next October when they start doing some gigs again, is back to business as usual with customers that are expecting something completely different. Okay? Remember, customers are going to be surprised if you don't change. The lack of sales skills, and I realize a lot of our salespeople aren't really salespeople, they're production managers or like me, a failed technician who got thrust into a role because we understand the equipment and we can use software to click on things and put prices together. The lack of sales skills make it much more difficult for you to get clients to pay for something, because as a production manager, we cave the first time the client says, oh, that's too expensive. Okay, well, let me make it less. We don't want to give up anything about the job. Oh, I don't want to take away from that. This is the right way to do it. We talked about it. This is the job we want to do, and the client won't pay for that. We just lower the price of the job because we're not salespeople, right? So professional salespeople, if you got one, give them a hug, right? These are the people that are going to help you make money coming out of this. Now, think about how you assess sales performance and value. And if you assess sales performance on revenue, then you're missing the point of everything I'm talking about. You need to assess it on the gross profit generated, and better yet, the gross profit that exceeds your expectations, right? That's the gross profit that's really valuable to you. And that's what we're trying to generate, is create opportunities to be pleasantly surprised with what we sold the job at. Some recap questions, and I'm going to go and answer some of the questions that are on the Q&A box right now. This question came, this is from last week, and I know I touched on it, but I want to answer it more clearly. One of our value adds to customers is the fact that we include pre-work as part of what we do. Basically, it's all the project management and project coordination functions. Now, how risky is it if we go back to our customers and say we're going to charge them for that now? If you went about it that way, yes, you will probably upset them. The first step to doing this is always to change the value-added things that you do and add them to the order, but just say it's included in the price. This is the old, you buy a $40,000 car and they throw in the car mats for free. Okay? The car mats, you already paid for the car mats. They just told you they were free. So change in the value-added things that you do and include them for free, and that's step one. The cost for those services have always been built into it, but now you've called them out and now they become negotiable. The cool thing is that when the client says, okay, yeah, this is great, but I really need to cut 10% off of there, you can say, well, tell you what, here's what I can do. Let me take out the 4 drawing revisions that you normally do, and let's get it down to 1 revision. Okay, and now let's do this. So all of a sudden you're negotiating with things that you used to do for free, and you're saving yourself time and money. It also gives you room that when they do add stuff back in or need 18 revisions on the drawings, that you have the basis for charging for it. Another question. For the people who do creative work, sometimes you have to go in and sell the job by presenting a design, a rendering, a drawing. How do you reconcile that charge when the client is just looking for a bid and you're looking to get your foot in the door? Well, we can't always say, hey, client, I need you to pay for this proposal that you want me to put together for you that you're going to use to assess all the other vendors, like capabilities pitch. Charging for a capabilities pitch. That may be a little bit difficult with some customers. Okay? This is called spec work. When you do spec work, what you need to do first and foremost is limit the scope of the spec work. Okay? If it's free, your challenge is to be as helpful as you can, but also be as incomplete as you can. A simple example is, instead of providing a complete set of drawings to the client on spec work, you provide rough renderings, you provide napkin drawings, you provide concept plates, but you don't give them the whole design. And for those of you that have to design things, who you can't put a budget together without getting every subject matter expert, every department head together and go through every detail and count every truss bolt in order to know what the job is worth. For those of you who have to do that, Okay, just stop doing that. But that's a different discussion. That's a different webinar. Learn how to budget without technical planning. But if you do that, keep that budget to yourself. That's an internal budget. You're doing it for your purposes so that you have a sense of the value of the job so that you can put the right price on it. Okay? You don't have to share that with the customer. So those are some first steps I would do to help keep myself from losing money on spec work. Another question, what about sub-rentals pricing to other companies? So B2B work. So if you're a production rental company and you rent from other production rental companies, don't you all work from a retail price list and a discount? Yeah, you probably do. So in general, I think your retail pricing is going to remain, but your discounts are probably going to get a little bit deeper, okay? I advise both sides of this equation, right? You guys rent from each other, and I'm telling you that when you are the one renting, ask for a better deal. And if you're the one selling, I tell you to ask for a better deal, okay? Work it out. It's cash flow, okay? The gear is sitting on the shelf. Just go back to that previous example I had about that job. It had $7,700 of variable direct costs. If a B2B buyer, if one of your colleagues wants to rent that package from you, but they don't necessarily need all the labor, well, then you can reduce the 70/70 cost because all you have to do is prep and de-prep. And now, what is it worth to get the gear off the shelf? So you can probably just rent the gear for, a 60% discount off the old retail price instead of the 40% that you may have done before. So you've got a lot of flexibility, but again, you're looking at your costs and going, how can I generate income? Very often in times like this, the B2B rentals will be more profitable for you because there's not a lot of labor involved, right? And you're going to recover that labor rather than doing, making 20 points on your labor pricing, unless you've raised your labor prices the way I've suggested. All right, let me go grab a couple of questions here from Q&A. Thank you. I warned you guys about long questions. Don't ask too long of questions. What is attendance? Okay, what has attendance been like for these webinars? Right now, we're at 424 people. That's been our normal attendance. We've had up to 500. We have 1,100 plus registered. This is great. I'm not going to answer questions about whether certain large companies with lots of letters or a few letters in their names are going to survive or go bankrupt. It's a waste of your time, by the way. There's absolutely no value in that other than maybe commiserating. So talk offline, have a beer with somebody, do a Zoom cocktail hour and discuss that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Let's see. We're a production company moving to progress billing. Should we expect AV gear companies to not ask for 50% up front months prior to the event? So when you're making a B2B transaction, you're probably going to negotiate different terms than they would with an end customer. The thing about B2B transactions is where each other lives, particularly if you're longtime associates. So you're probably not going to have to push out as much money up front. However, if you're on the sell side, I'm going to encourage you to ask for it because you need the cash flow. And you don't need another vendor tying up your reservation system with orders that they're going to cancel at the last minute. So you'll have to treat each transaction individually and each supplier individually. Will wholesale suppliers ask for money up front? Probably not. I think one of the values that they offer is the flexibility, and we'll talk about the value of flexibility later on in this webinar. Let's see. Okay, here's an interesting question. Tom, we've tried to get our employees to sign up for these webinars, but engagement is very low, as is morale. Any ideas how we can turn this around? These webinars may not be the best way to raise their morale. Sometimes I'm pretty morale lifting, but the fact is I have to deliver a lot of bad news, which they're going to have difficulty processing. However, help their morale by informing them what you've learned from this, maybe share snippets of them. I know many of you have taken the webinar and played back parts of it to your folks so that they understand the seriousness of what's going on. I think sometimes morale is low because people don't know enough. What can we do to help them better understand and understand in ways where it's not just us telling them. My job as a consultant, I spend a lot of time telling employees the exact same thing you tell them as an owner, but because I said it, they listen to me. Likewise, I often tell owners the same thing their employees say, but because I said it, the owner listens to me. So change the messenger is one way to help with that, and give them the opportunity to commiserate and ask the questions that they want to ask. And sometimes be okay telling them, I don't know. It's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that. Here's what we're doing. I don't know how it's going to turn out. Here's what we're doing, and inform them. The thing as an employee that I always wanted to know was, what can I count on? So my last thing about morale is tell people what they can count on. And instead of saying, I'm going to employ you through the end of June, say, I know I can employ you for 2 more weeks. I know I can commit to this for this much longer. And having your cash flow spreadsheet helps you do that, but don't overcommit. All right. So tell them what they can count on and stick to it, and then update what they can count on next. These things will all help. The third thing I would tell you to do is that free membership with Avixa that gives you access to online training. Get them to do that. Find some online training that you recommend for them, and write them a little bonus. Give them a little bit of bonus or a spiff if they complete that, if they can get the completion certificates. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. It's just got to be something. So take a look at some of those things. And by all means, in the chat, if anybody else has things that they've done to improve morale for the team, pop some of that in the chat, and let's help these folks out. By all means, join the roundtable on Friday, and maybe that will be a topic there as well. All right. Let's get into today's content. He said 30 minutes into the hour-long webinar. We're going to talk about marketing. We're going to talk about sales. I'm going to bring you some slides and things that I've used in the Jumpstart workshops from this past year. So this stuff is pretty fresh, pretty good. For those of you who aren't familiar with Jumpstart, these used to be these wonderful in-person events where 80 or 100 of you would come to Dallas, and we'd all get packed into a ballroom together, really close and seated on each other, and learn a bunch of stuff and network and do this kind of thing, but like all together, and often with an adult beverage in our hand. It's awesome. I hope to get back to that one day. In the meantime, I can deliver some of this content for you. All right. We're going to talk about marketing, which means that we have to talk about why we market. Okay? This is why we market. The story that I always share when I talk about marketing is, I don't know how many of you have watched the TV series Mad Men, but I'm not going to go through the whole series with you. And the character Don Draper is this advertising executive, the salesperson. He does deals, and one of the scenes he famously, stomps out of a client meeting because the client didn't care about the value that the firm could deliver. They only cared about the work the firm could execute. And his saying, Don's saying out of that was saying, I only sell to believers. You're not a believer. And he marched out. So our job is to create believers. Don's sales team delivered him a non-believer. Okay. The marketing filter didn't work. The business development filter didn't work. They chased revenue. They chased an account, the cachet of an account, instead of somebody who was buying what this firm was selling. So we want to be able to say no to relationships that reject the intended value proposition. And here's a great way. This is a wonderful slide to help illustrate that. So first thing I want you to look at is I want you to look at that diagonal line across the middle that goes between focus on product and focus on customer. First thing I want to say is there is no wrong value point on this chart. Something is not better than more dollar signs is not necessarily better. Okay, it's just a different value proposition with different risk levels to go with it. Okay, you can make more money, with single dollar signs if you do more volume, right? So this is not a judgment about the value of the individual job. It's what did you intend to sell and who did you intend to sell it to? So let's think about that B2B transactional relationship we were just talking about a few minutes ago. Okay, that is a capacity and price conversation. Hey, do you have any of these in? Great, I need 3 of them. What's your best price? Boom, we do a deal. It's incremental income. Your costs are pretty low. It's gear sitting on the shelf. It's hopefully a last-minute job. Off we go. Now, if I have two suppliers to choose from as the buyer, and I have one supplier who takes really good care of their gear, the crew's always happy to see their cases show up because they know they're going to be in great shape, versus this other supplier whose gear is pretty dang good, but they're a lot more flexible about pricing. They'll let you keep it an extra day or two, no big deal. They'll treat a day as same as a week. Flexibility. You're going to go to the supplier that feeds the need that you have. Do you need a better brand? Do you need more flexibility? Maybe you need better of both, in which case the price creeps up a little bit. Right? Now, as we look across this chart, we'll see that if we focus on our relationship with the customer, then we have to be able to introduce expertise to them, which has value to the customer, up to being immersed in the customer's business. An example of immersion, if you're in experiential marketing and you're dealing with the customer's brand and you're holding their brand in your hands and you're going to represent it to a large audience, that's immersion. You need to be completely embedded inside your customer's organization. You need to know how they tick. You need to know who all the players are because you're holding their baby in your hands. Okay? Of course, you need expertise to have that relationship, but that's an immersive relationship. Moving over to the vertical line, the value proposition you bring to the relationship is also important. Okay? Capacity, just having the capacity to do something has value. Okay? I got a crew, we can get that done. The brand adds additional value. But once you start selling outcomes rather than the products and services that make up the service, your value goes up even higher. The value proposition is greater. If you are unique, if nobody else does what you do or does it the way that you do it, okay, obviously that has the highest apex, that's the apex of value proposition relationships. So if I can take these two things, if I can be absolutely unique about what I do and be immersed in the customer's relationship to deliver something that's completely customer focused, obviously that's where the highest margin business is, right? So what we're looking at is where do you fit in? And what you want to do is say no to relationships that don't fit. If, the phrase I often use, is that customer buying what you're selling? If you're selling fantastic outcomes and they're trying to execute a transaction, you've got a mismatch. Only sell to believers. Sell to people who believe that what you're trying to do has value to them as well as it does to you. Now, having said all that, let's look at the building blocks of marketing. And marketing encompasses the entire customer experience. Marketing even exists in operations, much to the chagrin and surprise of operations people. It's very, very pervasive. So all these pieces fit together. They have an order to things. They support one another. And while they may not have a huge impact in an individual transaction, okay, they happen. They do exist. This thing happens. It may only happen briefly. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. So the left-hand side of your screen, that's really having to do with identifying your ideal customers, and which is part of what marketing does, is make sure that we're getting the right person to the conversation. And then once they're there, we move to the right-hand side of the equation of making a connection with them that will ultimately lead to a business outcome. The entire thing is the whole customer experience. So marketing, okay, answers what you do. Okay. Remember, we have a difference between how we do things and what it is that we actually do. We want to sell the what because the what has more value. That's the outcome. Even in a B2B rental transaction, the outcome has more value than a simple transaction. So if we can add outcome to something, everybody's going to win. So marketing answers what you actually do. Right? Now we'll get over into how you do it, which starts to happen over in the sales side of the equation. Okay, the target customer always comes first, and where most of you could spend some very valuable time, especially now, is having a better understanding of who your target customer is, or your target customers are, the different personas that you're trying to attract because without this information, we're just flailing. We're just shooting in the wind. There's no rhyme or reason. We're just hoping that the right person shows up in this throng of people who are mismatched. So the clearer your target, then the clearer your brand will be to the ideal customer. Now, brand is who you want to be seen as. It's all the impressions that matter. Everything that you do, everything people see affects your brand. Aiming your brand at your ideal customer will yield better impressions. All right? So here's your brand, here's the ideal customer. If we focus those together, okay, we're going to have a better impression. They're going to have a better understanding of what you are, why you exist, so that they will engage with you. Okay. When your brand is consumed by non-ideal buyers, okay, they can become negative influencers. So some part of your brand is going to impress probably everyone, but some part of your brand is going to get to people who don't matter to you. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. I talk about restaurants a lot because we all relate to it. In the US, the Olive Garden. It's a chain restaurant, family dinners, celebratory Italian dining experience. I've got a friend who's a general manager of one, very successful. They make food from scratch. I am not an Olive Garden target customer. I have been trashing the Olive Garden for years in polite conversation. I'm a negative influencer because they targeted their brand message to me and I am not the target. So what they need to do is make it clear that I'm not their target and I'll leave them alone. So we need to do the same thing with our customers. So once the client is engaged with the brand, then the things that we do to be attractive to them, these are generally static things that they can discover and allow marketing to pull them further into the relationship. Attracting is about being visible, being desirable, and it works better if your brand and your target are in sync. Be easy to like by people who would look for you. Now, attracting is passive. Promotion is proactive, okay? Promoting is how we get in front of the people we can't attract. It's how we move faster. So an example of promotion for you would be going to a networking event and spreading your business card around, shaking hands, doing elevator pitches. Okay, that's a promotion. Okay, it's an accelerator. You're going to get in front of people who don't know who you are much more efficiently through promotion than waiting for them to discover you through your attractive efforts. Okay? Now, the message that we're trying to deliver here is what? Again, think about outcomes, what we do for people that they can't do for themselves or prefer not to. Okay? That's who you are. Okay. Once we've got them into our fold and we start to introduce some human engagement. Now, you can do a lot of business development through marketing tools, but for the sake of you, my audience, let's just assume that there's a human being involved. And business development doesn't have to be a separate person from sales. Business development is a process. Okay? It's not a title. Okay? It's a process. So I can have different people who execute a business development process. Now, so the key here is that the successful business development process begins with engagement. Okay? By the time we reach the proposal, business development should be out of the picture, right? It's a filtering process. And the first test that business development does is for fit. We want to make sure that we have the right fit customer. In other words, do we attract the right person? We want to make sure that our filters are in place. If it's not the right fit, then we politely exit the conversation and move on to a better fitting prospect. Okay? Once we have a good fit, we want to create deeper engagement. Okay? And once we have that deeper engagement with them, whether it's we did a capabilities pitch, we went out to dinner, we played some golf, whatever, we did a demo for them. Now we're going to start working on more of the sales process, which is about matching. And what I'm matching is the needs of the buyer to the things that we do. Okay? You have a lot of products and services, more than you think you do. And they have a lot of needs, more than they think they do. The matching process helps us connect those things so that we see all the good reasons why we should be doing business together. Matching is very, very important because too often clients get to this stage and don't realize, oh, Oh, you do that? Oh, I didn't know you guys did that. We already contracted somebody else. I guess we don't really need you, right? We want to get that matching process in there so they understand. That's why we do capabilities pitches, so that people know, can see themselves doing business with you. That will lead to a proposal. Okay, now, many of us rush to proposal stage. We want to get that proposal. We want that RFP so we can write a proposal. That's very, very transactional. It's hard to extract value from that. If we want to get true value out of a relationship, we want to make our marketing pay off, then we want to put that proposal as far down the road as we possibly can. But when we do start the proposal process, there's some steps that we go through, first of which is a conceptual agreement, where we agree on what the proposal is going to say and how it's going to look and what it's going to deliver. And then this is just a formal declaration of what we've already agreed upon. That's the ideal proposal. Sometimes I call it going straight to an agreement. Now, we can't always get a conceptual close with the customer, but we can get them closer to that agreement before they actually review the proposal. Now, the final part of this is getting down to the negotiation. So half of your negotiating process is unnecessary if all of the blocks fit together. If you've done everything that I've just talked about in terms of having the right marketing, attracting the right person, going through the fit, engagement, matching, and proposal processes, then the rest of this actually becomes pretty darn easy. Okay? So if all the blocks fit together, the customer experience is holding that customer in with you, everybody's tight together. The closing now becomes purely based on financial terms and not price. Your conceptual agreement, we agree on the value of this, but now we have terms to deal with, which is people's money. So you affirmed what you need. You've shown them in the sales process how you do it, though not completely. You've explained why you do it that way, which is part of your brand image. And if you're bidding on work, then you're selling to non-believers. So if you feel that you're bidding on a job and they're going to collect a bunch of bids, understand that you already have a non-believer. Okay? What can we do to make that person a believer so that the rest of the bids don't matter? But if you are a believer, so here's my price, okay, and here are your options to pay. These options don't change the value of what we do. Okay? All options do is address the value of money. You can pay me 100% up front, and here's your price. You can pay me 50% now. You can do pay-as-you-go billing. You can do as progress billing. You can show them 3 payment options, of which you can live with any one of the 3. It all delivers the exact same outcome. The only change is the cost of money and when money is delivered. Money is delivered later, the price goes up. Money is delivered sooner, you have more non-cancelable money, you can charge less. Okay, so there's a lot of things that you can do to meet this. So closing means that the right closer who knows the cost or parameters and has the authority to say yes or no to an offer is there. So if your salesperson doesn't have the ability to negotiate a close during a terms discussion, when the client says, yeah, I can do that, but I can pay you up front, but we want to get another 5% off, and we need a clause that says if there's another pandemic that you'll return 50% of the money. Your closer has to be able to agree to that deal. If they have to leave and go get permission to do that, okay, you'll be losing money the entire time they're gone, the time they come back, because the price is going to drop. Make sure you have a closer at the table. Now, that's not going to be hard now because most of you had to lay off your sales team. Your closer is probably the owner of the business or a general manager. They probably have a lot of authority. This will be easier to do in the current climate. All right, I want to pause here, grab a couple of questions, and then we'll get on talking a little bit about the sales side of this equation. Okay. All right, so I've never had a customer that was okay with just an end line price. Everyone always asks for the breakdowns. If we are saying that we sell value, how would you recommend that we refuse to give our customers the breakdown and convince them to look at the total value instead? All right, I'm gonna tell you a story, okay? Yeah, if you throw the client a big old project and you give them a single line item, of course they're gonna ask you for a breakdown because clearly they don't understand what you're doing. There are things that you need to break down, and there are options that you need to lay out. But let's think differently about this. The old story, and anybody that's been to a Jumpstart's probably heard the story too many times. When I started selling audio, when we added audio to what we sold, we were renting speakers. We were doing sound for multi-level marketing meetings and counting the number of speakers that we're putting on the proposal because it was a rental, right? And it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you need to put the sound in there that you need to put in there. So once we had been spanked pretty hard by making a bad mistake with an important client, we started putting sound budgets together differently. And rather than focusing on how we were going to put sound in the room and how many speakers and how many amps and how many processors, we focused on what it would do, which is we're going to deliver incredible sound for 1,500 people at Rounds with a live concert. What's included? Everything it takes. Well, can you give me an itemized list? No, because we're not going to design it until you award me with a job. But I will guarantee that everybody will hear, it'll deliver the sound pressure levels that we need, and it'll be perfectly designed to the environment that you're in. And the price is not going to change unless you change the parameters of the job. Oh, so are you really qualified, dear customer, to tell me how many equalizers I need or how many parametrics I need to put in the package? Okay. Now, we don't have to get down to the weeds with them on that, but the fact of the matter is, this will do everything you asked for and then some. Okay. I'm not going to design it until you've awarded me the job. And then I'm happy to go over it line by line with you and show you how many 6-inch jumper cables we're putting into the case. So that's how you do it. Give them pieces of things that are rolled in. A video switching package for 3 cameras, and don't tell them all the parts and pieces that go in it. Say, this is going to do everything we need to do. Everything we talked about. I can put any signal anywhere into the system, and you're going to be happy. Okay, I can say yes as many times as you want when it comes to routing signals. Okay? Sell them the capabilities. Sell them what the system will do, not how you're going to do it, not parts and pieces. Now, back in my day, we had to sell brand names. I mean, literally, if you didn't name your brand, you were suspect. And people lost jobs because they didn't have the right brand of cameras or the right brand of speakers. We don't have to do that anymore. You're not going to lose a job because you had a PV processor and an amp rack. Let's see. All right, comment here, change is expected. What would you suggest we offer as commissions to salespeople in the new normal? Currently, we pay them on a percentage of the gross. My commission, my views on commission really has not changed at all. I want to pay commission on the amount of gross profit generated above a base. Here's a minimum gross profit we have to generate. I call it the floor. The floor we have to generate changes seasonally. So if my floor gross profit in October is 50%, my floor gross profit in July might be 30%, depending on how October being busy, July being slow. So I want to generate commissions based on exceeding the floor gross profit to encourage them to sell higher. I also want to give them a bonus on revenue. So I want some component of it to be revenue because sometimes I'm going to make them sell at the floor because as a sales manager or general manager, I'm going to go, no, we need this job. We need this job more than you need the commission. So I'm also paying you 2%, for instance, of gross revenue to make up for the fact that you're not going to get any gross profit commission or bonus. So we need to have multiple pieces of a commission structure in order to do this. Commission is to incentivize the behavior that you want. You want them to close profitable revenue at the highest available margin. More of a question as a comment. Drive-in events seem to be taking off as a concept. Yeah, they are. They will for a while. Don't forget to figure in the cost of royalties and licensing where applicable. Yeah. Trust me, if you're going to show a movie, if you're going to have a movie day, a drive-in movie day for a corporation, and you can't just throw your copy of The Lion King into the player or stream it. There are royalties involved when you're showing it to a paying audience if somebody has paid you to present it. So just look into all of that. Don't get into hot water on all of this. Here's a good question. Do you recommend doing the employee retention credit instead of the PPP since there's no work happening now or the next couple of months, this may be more advantageous. Yeah, sometimes say you can look at the difference in EIDL. You can get a loan that is not forgivable. It's a low interest rate loan. It's for operating your business. PPP has it's payroll protection, so it's got some payroll rules and all of that. You should look at what's best for you. Most of you we've now learned enough ways to kind of work out the system, but nobody really knows how they're going to do the accounting on payroll protection and for the loan forgiveness. So my recommendation is do what makes business sense for you to try and recover as much of that as you can. And realize that for some of you, bringing employees back under PPP might simply just be magnanimous on your part, which is not a horrible thing to do. For rescheduling of shows, we've been asking for deposits at that time of reschedule to reserve crew and gear. Good practice? Absolutely, absolutely. Well done. That's exactly what we should be doing. Particularly if they had a reserved package and they need to reschedule it. If they have a deposit, we want to move that deposit, but we should be asking for an additional deposit because they've done it once, and we want to make sure that they're further committed. And it also gives them impetus to move it again, right? Because now they're more invested into the job, so it's better to reschedule it. So yeah, I think that's definitely a good practice. What are your thoughts on when live events will be allowed and encouraged again? See, the thing is, they actually already are. There's just a lot of restrictions for them. The business as usual, as I said back at the beginning of this webinar, quite a while. We have to do business in the new normal first before we'll see business as usual again. But regionally, the way it's going to come back, there's the micro return. You have individual clients that have little needs here and there. That's happening already right now. You're doing little streaming events. You're giving them a sound system for whatever it might be. Maybe the owner has a backyard party. These are micro transactions. Embrace them. Soon you will start to have local transactions. We start to open businesses back up and that restart the economy thing. And it's going to be different customers. You're going to have stores that are open and they need to let people know. They want to put a sign in the parking lot or put a sound system out front because they can't let but one person into the store at a time. You'll be surprised at some of the creative things that you can do for a few $100s here, a few $1,000s there. Pretty soon it adds up to real money. Then you'll start getting to regional events, regional business, which is probably more of your traditional clients for most of you. There'll be company meetings, whether they'll be having company gatherings again. We'll see a few parties and a few celebrations, probably as the summer wears on. The densely packed events and the national events are going to be much, much later in the process. So if you are a company that only does national work, your clients are anywhere, the events they do are anywhere, you don't really have a local or regional business, I'm still telling those folks, and often many of you are telling me that you're not expecting any business until probably second quarter of 2021, if not later than that. Remember, Microsoft says they are having no meetings until June of next year, and that gives them a long time to revise that prognosis. So it's a complicated question. It's an important question. You could probably ask it every week, and I'll modify it ever so slightly. All right, let me move on here. All right, sales. All right, it's gonna be a long webinar today. So some foundational sales stuff. Bow tie effect. Before we start talking about sales, we need to talk about what happens when sales goes wrong. And I see this a lot in our industry, so I've talked about it for years. It's called the bow tie effect. The bow tie effect is when you have one salesperson whose job it is to keep one client engaged. And these two people together keep all of the other people out of the relationship so that nobody will muck it up. This is a protectionist stance. I want these two people, one throat to choke. I have the relationship. I'm the right person to talk to the client. I'm the person that understands them. Oh my goodness, what a nightmare. We've got to get out of this. What we're looking for is actually what we call the diamond. Let me get a couple of steps. So the idea that you have two salespeople or a salesperson and a customer that are keeping everyone apart is anathema to selling value and selling relationships and maintaining a client. What we want to do is we want to turn the bow tie around and make it a diamond. And by making it a diamond, I want to have multiple relationships between the seller's people and the buyer's people. I want the shipping, receiving for the two companies working together. I want accounting working together. Different relationships between creative and marketing and event planning and meeting planning. All these people. The more people that we have engaged, the harder it is to break this apart. That's why it's a diamond. All right. So the job of our salespeople is to find that point, usually after we've done the fit conversation and we're moving into matching. We want to match them with all the resources that we have together and start lining people up together and create those indelible bonds. Now, the good news is when this happens, if you lose a salesperson, you probably won't lose the relationship. Salespeople don't own relationships. Your company owns relationships, and don't ever forget that. And if you have any salesperson who thinks otherwise, you need to sit them down and explain the world to them, because these are your customers, okay? And their job is to keep the customer engaged and keep that customer with you as long as possible, even after they leave. So in the bow tie and the diamond effect, the buyer and seller facilitate communication and collaboration to keep the B2B relationship going. This is extremely important in what we do. Now, I talked earlier about, I'm sorry, we got different generations of slides here, but it was easier than reproducing them all under one slide theme. Yeah, down and dirty, what are we gonna do? Customer experience that we talked about earlier in marketing, sales makes a contribution. One of the things that's important for sales to do is, one, understand how all the building blocks work together so they know exactly what to do next. It's not just the process of selling that they need to do next, they need to understand the whole process of marketing. Salespeople need to be thorough, which for most of them means they need to slow down. Slow the process down. We'll make fewer mistakes. We'll have more time to find the ways to add value. We slow down. Don't rush to get a proposal out, which is exactly how I used to sell. I used to hang up the phone, have the proposal sent off in the next 10 minutes. That was my value proposition. I got people numbers really quickly. That's not where we are today. That's not the business most of you are in. So be thoughtful, listen, consider, share, collaborate, but collaborate not just with the client, but with the team around you. Again, that's that diamond effect. It takes a lot of people to have a good business to customer relationship, and sales' job is to kind of orchestrate all of that. We know we have to negotiate at some point, and I want to talk about the elements of effective negotiation. This matters now. This is very important right now because any deal that you have is going to be important for you, so you want to tee yourself up for success. You need three things to negotiate well. You have to have a clear scope of work, you have to have a clear understanding of what the customers need, and you need to understand the customer's buying style because that's going to affect how they negotiate. Okay? If you don't have their buying style, you have a very good chance that you're going to miss a lot of value, you're going to leave money on the table, or worse, you're going to scare them off. If you don't have a clear scope, which means that some things are getting made up or there are surprises along the way, you're not going to get another project out of that client. These tend to be one-time projects. If you don't have a clear understanding of the customer's need, then you're going to end up with a transactional outcome, right? The scope's there, you got their buying styles met. All of these things are right, then you've got a clear cost and budget that you can work within. Everybody, it's transparent, everybody knows what to expect, and this gives us the point to negotiate. I want to negotiate into that cost and budget parameter, which means I need to leverage everything I know about the scope, the needs, and their buying style in order to do this. Now, what are buying styles? Excellent question. I'm glad you asked. Well, actually, where am I? I'm sorry. I'll talk about customer. I may skip ahead to customer buying styles. Yeah, I'll come back to that. Part of the process I said was about understanding the customer's need. We need to be doing mirroring. So the perfect close, let's think about this. The perfect situation to close would be a no. That's a perfect close. The customer said no. Perfect. Okay? The sooner we know that the customer is going to say no, the better off everybody is. The less time you have invested, the less hope you have, the more time you have to move on to the next deal. So that's a perfect close. But if we do everything else right in marketing and we get to a yes, the perfect close is all the terms and conditions are built in. There's very little negotiating, and it's simply the customer saying yes, and that's the perfect close. So as we mirror what the customer says and what the customer feeds back to us, and we feed back to them, if we get that intelligent mirroring going on, then by the time you write a proposal, the deal is already done. So it's very helpful to be highly communicative as a salesperson and be very good at thinking on your feet and doing this. Because here's the challenge that salespeople have. There's a spot to close in, okay? There's a spending point, and anywhere on the spending line, you're happy, okay? You can make money wherever the customer spends. It's usually a change in scope, but there's a closing spot where the customer's feelings about what they're gonna buy peak, and that's where we wanna close. And then after they peak, they start to fall down again, and then they fall off generally pretty fast. So there's a point in spending, and think about buying a car. You know, you go in there planning on buying a $30,000 car, and then you find out the features on the $35,000 car, and then the salesman shows you the $40,000 car, and all of a sudden you start to lose interest and start rethinking this, and maybe you're going to go home and have a drink, right? The salesman should have closed you at $35,000 and said, let's move forward on this. Okay? And we've got to be able to recognize where that sweet spot is in doing this. And the way we do this is customer buying styles. So there are 3 primary customer buying styles, and I've got a chart here for you, which you're going to want to take a screenshot of. I know you will. Confidence, value, and control. These are the 3 primary traits of customers. Most customers have a primary trait that they are most of the time, but they also have a secondary trait, which is going to become very important to what we're doing. And secondary traits tend to manifest when you are closing. They will be a confidence buyer right up to the point where you're closing, and all of a sudden they're a value buyer, which means that they were confidence value. And if we can identify who they are, then we'll know how to deal with them and what their decision factors are. So primary traits: confidence, value, control. So confidence buyers want you to be the expert. They need for you to know everything. They want to have ultimate confidence in you. And if you can't fill their need for confidence, they will take their business elsewhere because you haven't met their primary need. Value customers want to have a fair deal. They want to know enough about the deal to make sure that they're getting a good value and they can do their own assessment. So make sure that we understand how to make the deal as transparent for them as we can without giving them all the how in the process. Control customers don't need you to be an expert because they are the expert, and they want to define their needs. They don't want you to tell them what their needs are. That's what a control customer is. But most of these come in with a secondary value. So in this chart, if you'll line up the 2 columns, a confidence customer, somebody who's extremely focused on confidence, wants you to be an expert. In order to close the deal, you have to gain their unerring trust. If they are a confidence value customer, they still need you to be an expert, but they kind of want to make sure they're getting an honest deal. Right? A confidence control customer, which is kind of freaky, you have to be a proven expert, and you're going to have to reaffirm the scope, which is another way of developing trust. So not only do you have to be an expert, you have to be a proven expert. You need to have affirmation. You need to have validation from third-party experts that you're an expert. And then you're going to have to go over the scope and make sure it's exactly what they want and there are no surprises. The sooner we recognize the traits in these buyers, the better job we will do of putting the information in front of them and giving them the customer experience that's going to help them close the deal. Value buyers, value confidence is looking for a fair deal, but they want to make sure their needs are met. This will do what I want, right? Okay. A value buyer, extreme value, wants a good deal, but they also want to know they're getting a custom solution so that not only is it a good deal, it's a deal that no one else is going to get. Okay. A value control buyer wants a great deal and they want choices, which is like crazy difficult to do. Okay, value control customers are a little bit challenging. Okay, control confidence buyers, again, a little bit of an oxymoron. They want to define the needs, but they also want to make sure that you're the perfect fit. They want to make, so there's a certain insecurity in that. So they want to control, but they're really trying to make sure that they're constantly judging whether or not you're a good fit for them and are they going to be comfortable with you. Control value customers want to define the price. Okay? And they want an option for value. They're not going to take it. They're going to take the price that they define, but they always want to see the other option for better value that they probably won't take. And then control customers are going to do it their way. They're going to do it at their price, which is most of your RFP customers. Okay. I sold to control buyers. That's how I made a living. All of my clients were control customers. It takes a lot of knack to squeeze extra money out of those people, but you can do it. So I talked a little bit about conceptual close in there. Conceptual close is when you agree on everything, but you simply have not written out the agreement and countersigned it. We want to get there before we write a proposal, particularly in times like this, when every deal is special to both parties. Get to a conceptual close and then put it on paper with no surprises. And here's another great place to take a screenshot. You need a pre-negotiation checklist. As a sales manager, I'm going to ask my salesperson questions when they bring me a deal. And oh, by the way, you should be approving deals before they go to the client for the final negotiation. We want to know, does the client understand what your brand represents? Okay? Or in other words, is our marketing working? Do we understand their buying style? Have we done a complete match? Did they know all the things that we do? Did we ask them about doing this for them? Do I understand what the fit and finish is important for this customer? Okay, there's different levels of value, and they're all based on the fit and finish of the job. How nice do they want it to be? Do we understand what that is? Does the customer understand how we do things? In other words, have we told them what the next steps are? Okay, next steps are always important. Finish every sales conversation with a next step. Does the customer see themselves doing business with you? How would we know that? What kind of questions or things would they ask to indicate that they see themselves doing business with you? Things like, tell me about how your billing works, is them seeing how they do business with you. And then of course, do we have a conceptual agreement? And man, I packed a lot of content in this week. One more slide here, closing with a proposal. Sometimes you will have to close with a proposal, I get that. We can't always avoid it. We can't always do the things that get us out of that. But if we do close a proposal, take a look at the situation that you're starting with. If the customer has a budget versus the customer wants to know what it's going to cost. Now, hopefully we clear this up in the conceptual close, but very often the client doesn't know what their budget needs to be or how much they have to spend because they don't know what different amounts of money will get them. So if they have a fixed budget, I want to give them 3 proposals if I'm closing with a proposal and not a conceptual close. And I'm going to give them 3 different options on how to spend their budget. As the seller, I should be agnostic about which one they choose. I want to give them some good choices. And depending on their buying style, which will tell me what the different options might need to look like. It could be a different option on value, the same package, but a different price point or a different terms point, or it can be an ABC level of fit and finish, but it's all going to fit in their budget. So there's going to be trade-offs in there. If they need to know what their budget is going to be, then I want to give them 3 different budgets, 3 distinct price points with different fits and finish. Okay. Now, this becomes a needs proposal, in which case they're going to go back, take that information, share it with other people, and figure out what their budget is. So you're probably not going to close with that proposal, but you're going to get guidance on where to go next. And hopefully you'll be down to 1 version, a conceptual close, and then writing a final agreement. Whoosh! All right. I'm going to take a little Q&A break. Let me scan a few questions here. Next week, we're going to talk about operations and talk about a scalable operation. How do you go from airplane mode to doing business without bringing your entire operations crew back? Part of what I've observed for many of you is that you run at a much higher staffing level than you need, or you run at a much lower staffing level than you need, but you use high staffing processes. So we want to have low staffing processes and a low staffing model, so that we have a more scalable business in the future, and we'll talk about that. So a couple more questions here, and then I got a few announcements, and then I'll answer a bunch more questions after that. So how do you reconnect with your event producers, planners, and who have canceled all future events and are scared to try and move forward toward a virtual event? Yeah, just call them. I realize that most of us are introverts, and picking up the phone and calling somebody to say, hey, how are you doing, is hard for us, but that's what you do. You got event producers say, hey, how you doing? Is there anything I can do for you? Nobody's ever going to slam the phone down on you for saying, is there anything I can do for you? And sometimes they say, yeah, I'm doing a lot of these web conferences and I don't have a headset. Can you recommend one? Yeah. Matter of fact, I'll send you one. Boom. Find a reason to call them. Don't create expectations out of it. Just say, hi, what's going on? You guys safe? You doing good? You have what you need? Anything I can do for you? Nothing wrong with that. But phone calls right now, people are going to answer their phones right now. They're sitting at home. They may be working from home. They may be busy. They may have the kids at home. But honestly, they want the human interaction. So just do that. If a client isn't returning calls due to being laid off, should we try and reach out, keep trying to reach out, or is that bad taste? No, keep them in your marketing loop. If they're not returning calls because they're not being paid, they're laid off, they don't feel that they're connected with the business, where are they going to end up next? What are they going to do next? So yeah, I don't want to chase them off, but I don't want them to think I've forgotten them. But if you're constantly reaching out to people, the implication is that you're expecting something from them. It's a little bit desperate. So find the altruistic reason for reaching out to folks. They don't have any business right now. Ask them how they're doing. Say, hey, we're doing this over here. Would this be interesting to you? Would you like to watch a video of it? Here's a blog I've been following. I think you might be interested. Share something with them. Just basic marketing stuff. It doesn't all have to be about self-promotion. Somebody make a comment here that they sent a bunch of Omaha steaks as a morale booster to the whole staff. I like Omaha steaks. It worked out great. Food on the table. You show you care as an employer. You can do this with customers as well. I received a gift package from a charity that I donate to. It happens to be the high school that I went to, which is the Catholic high school run by Hungarian Cistercian monks. And they sent some fudge that was made by Trappist monks who had visited the monastery the year prior. And so they sent all of their donor base, maybe all their alumni base, I have no idea who all they sent it to, this lovely package of fudge. And here I am talking about it. So if you can find an inexpensive way of reaching out to people and saying, hey, I hope your quarantine is going well, we're thinking of you. Here's something to help you put on a few pounds. That might not be a bad thing. Do it for your employees, do it for your clients. So I see we have a bunch more questions. Let me make a couple of announcements here and I'll fill up the rest of the time answering questions. Again, group coaching. I've got a group coaching program. We've almost got the first group filled up. Take a couple more folks. We'll start filling the second group after that. Please go visit this webpage, learn more about it if you're interested. There's a link there. Shoot me an email. And you don't have to write me a check or send me a credit card or anything right away. We'll wait until the group starts and then we'll come back and do all of that. But we are looking for commitments, and when I have enough commitments to start a group, then we'll get started. It's pretty darn simple. So there's a lot of value there. This is a very aggressive price point. We'll just put it that way. So go take a look at that and see if it's a good fit for you. I'm still doing the free calls. Don't hesitate to schedule one if you have not done it already. And let's just see how you're doing. Make sure you've made the right steps, or maybe you have a business issue or a question that you want, or you just want my home address to send me an Omaha steak. Avixa's Business Survival Exchange. Do register for this. It's a good use of your time. Get with your peers in a roundtable setting and discuss all this stuff I'm throwing at you. which I know sometimes is a little bit of a fire hose. Of course, here's the recording page, which you should already know. And a final thought before we get on to some more questions for a few more minutes. Think about what's the value of just one better decision in business right now. One good decision right now can have a huge impact on the longevity of your business and what you do. It could be saying yes to a $5,000 job you would have said no to before. It could be making a decision about its staffing levels that extends the lifeblood of your business for another 3 months. Make some good decisions, look at the value, find a way to measure it, and just do it. Because that's the difference between companies that survive and companies that don't. Every decision you make right now is important. Look at that value of it. And if you don't know how to assess the value, call me, send me an email. Let's talk about it. I'll help anybody out that has a need like that. All right, I got about 7 more minutes for questions here. All right, I love this question. Where are the believers now? They're still out there. Your customers are still believers. They just don't believe that you're doing anything that will help them right now. You've got to change that. Okay? If you come to them and say, here's what we do and we can do it for you, they will listen to you, but you've got to engage them. Now, you also need to listen to what's important to them right now, because part of them being believers is knowing that you have an empathetic ear. So put your producer, salesperson, listener hat on and chat with these customers. Ask them how you can help. You'll be amazed at the answers that you'll get. They are still believers, but we need to go talk to them. If you're looking for transactions right now, you're not going to be successful. Okay, you're not. It's going to be a bit of a non-starter. Don't do that. There will be a time and place to start asking for transactions. Let's see. Here's a question. Near term, will there still be high demand for Ferrari products, or will customers be looking mostly for cheap? No, customers are going to be looking for outcomes. I don't think customers don't look for products. This question may be coming from a manufacturer, but customers don't look for products, okay? They look for what it will do. So we still, as a consumer base, have very high expectations of what technology will do for us. Certainly more so than the threads I'm involved with on Facebook, where we're talking about multi-image slide projectors and alignment slides from 30 years ago. Your clients have a much higher level of expectations. So there's not a cheap version of what they want to do. There's a valuable version of what they want to do. So now, if you went out and bought the product that costs 3 times as much as the product that will do the exact same thing because you wanted the cachet or you were an early adopter, it doesn't change the value of the output. Okay? It may not be commensurate with your investment, but the value of the output is still what you're going to sell on. I remember when line array audio systems became ubiquitous, and all the people who had invested in BDOS systems, which was the proprietary line array that was available and extremely expensive, it didn't change what people wanted sound to do. It just lowered the price, the value of a VDOS system, because now there were reasonable substitutes. Another question, what about giving them a list of all the gear and labor, but only listing a single price for hardware and single line for labor? There's not a lot of buyers who need the list of gear and labor, except a control buyer. So if you're dealing with a control buyer and they've told you what the gear and labor needs to look like, then you need to mirror that in your proposal, in which case putting a single price by section or whatever. But control buyers, they want to move the numbers. Now, they don't need to move the numbers on the number of microphones, right? It's like, well, I need 4 table mics. Oh, maybe I need 6. And they're not probably manipulating a complicated spreadsheet to figure all that stuff out, but they might be. If they are, you've got a different problem on your hands. So look at the customer buying style, put the proposal in front of them that's appropriate for their needs. If you're trying to impress them with all the gear that you're going to provide at the price point you're going to provide, I would send them pictures instead. Send them pictures of racks and send them pictures of setup. Your front of house is going to look like this. Here's what your backstage area will look like. That's probably a lot more impressive than a bunch of items that they don't understand. Do you think there's a chance that outdoor events will come back before indoor events of similar capacity? Absolutely. Yeah, there's less open air transmissions. It's easier to keep people apart. I think what we'll see is a lot of events going into spaces that are 4 or 5 times larger than what they used to be in. It's easier and less expensive to do that outdoors. Now, the good news for us is I don't need a sound system for 1,000 people outdoors. I need a sound system that covers 1,000 people spread out over an acre. So I need a bigger sound system. So I need bigger screens because we're covering more area. The audience is spread out more. So some of our formulas about what it costs to put on events based on audience size won't work in this new scenario, but I think that's what we're going to see. Our first outdoor concerts are probably going to be, the lawn is going to be set up in boxes, and you're going to have access to a box through a 10-foot wide aisle, and there's going to be 6 feet between boxes. We'll see some interesting things, but I think it will happen. As I said in the early webinars, there's going to be more pent-up demand for entertainment. My wife just found out that our Hamilton tickets for June or July or whatever just canceled. So damn, I wanted to see Hamilton again. But until they can, do a Broadway show, with, 500 people in the audience instead of 3,000 and make money, I don't think that's going to happen. What if your company can't agree on our target audience? Awesome question. Last question. What if we can't agree on our target audience? I feel they always take on projects that push company in too many directions. All right. Owners, it's your dictatorship. Sometimes you have to be a dictator. So if the company doesn't agree on the target audience, that means that the owner doesn't know which way to go. Get some help. A great group coaching is a great way to do that. Hiring a coach, getting an advisor. You need to be more decisive. You're part of the problem. So if you're shotgunning business because you can't agree on who your target customer is, or you're afraid of losing any customer who might have money in their pocket, then we need to go back and define a target customer that's broad enough to capture all the things you're afraid of losing. It's still a target customer. It just lacks definition. So that's a strategic question. It's important. Trust me, your employees want you to be more decisive. Even if you're decisively wishy-washy, let's make it very clear what you're wishy-washy about and what the parameters and the lines are and all of that. They need it. They need it to do their job. Thank you. That's a great question. So, wow. I hope the hour and a half went by as fast for you as it did for me. That's a lot of stuff. Thank you guys once again for being here. We're going to have a great discussion next week on operations. Don't forget to sign up for the AVIXA Roundtable on Friday. And hey, be safe, be well, take care of yourselves, give yourself some break. We're all in this together. Show will go on. Cheers.